The B-17 Flying Fortress is one of the most iconic aircraft of World War II. Featured in countless documentaries and museum exhibits, it's often remembered for its ruggedness and firepower. But behind the legend lies a brutal truth, one defined not just by metal and machinery, but by the terrifying experiences of the young men who flew inside. This is not just a story about a bomber, it's about endurance, fear, survival, and sacrifice at 20,000 feet. Nicknamed the Flying Fortress, the B-17 earned its reputation with up to 13 machine guns placed in nearly every direction: nose, tail, sides, and even a spinning ball turret beneath the fuselage. American commanders believed that with enough firepower and tight formation flying, these bombers could defend themselves even in broad daylight. So, unlike the British who bombed under cover of darkness, US crews flew in full view of enemy guns. In theory, it made sense. In practice, it was deadly. Each B-17 carried 10 crew members: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, flight engineer, and 5 gunners. Crammed into a freezing metal tube, they endured deafening noise, thin air, and constant danger. Among the most dangerous positions was the ball turret gunner, who curled up inside a glass bubble beneath the plane. There was no room for a parachute. If the turret jammed or the plane broke apart, escape was almost impossible. This danger was no exaggeration. Nearly half of all B-17 crewmen were killed, wounded, or captured during the war. Amidst the horror, a few stories stand out as almost unbelievable. In 1943, a B-17 named All-American was nearly sliced in half by a German fighter. Its tail was left hanging by just a few metal strips. Somehow, the autopilot system still functioned, and with help from nearby aircraft, the crew managed to return safely miraculously, without major injuries. Other stories were even more surreal. Alan McGee, a 20-year-old ball turret gunner, was blown from his aircraft at 20,000 feet over France. His parachute was shredded by flak. He plummeted 4 miles before crashing through the glass roof of a train station, and lived. German forces, stunned, gave him immediate medical care. Meiji survived the war and lived to be 84. Eugene Moran, another gunner, fell inside the tail section of his bomber after it was blown off. His parachute was also destroyed. He braced for death, but instead, the wreckage slammed into pine trees, breaking his fall. He survived with a crushed skull and was later treated by a Serbian doctor in a German POW camp. James Lay experienced something similar. His B-17 collided with another aircraft in the clouds. He didn't realize he was falling inside the detached tail section until it crash-landed in a forest. He was rescued by Greek Orthodox monks alone, but alive. Despite the threat from enemy fighters, most bomber crews feared flak, the most German anti-aircraft shells that detonated mid-air, spraying metal shards in every direction. These weapons weren't fired blindly. Radar systems calculated bomber flight paths and detonated the shells with lethal accuracy. B-17 crews had to fly straight into it. Swerving or evasive maneuvers weren't an option during bombing runs. They watched as planes beside them exploded, hoping to see parachutes often. They didn't. Even after surviving a bombing run, the journey back was fraught with danger. Planes limped home with engines on fire, gaping holes in their fuselage, and dead crew members aboard. In one harrowing mission, Lieutenant Delancey's bomber had its entire nose torn off by flak. With no windshield, no instruments, and freezing wind pouring in, he somehow kept the aircraft flying. The bombardier was killed instantly, but Delancey dove low enough for the crew to breathe and landed without brakes or flaps. It was nothing short of a miracle. And if the crew had to bail out, that brought its own nightmares: damaged parachutes, blocked escape hatches, unconscious airmen. Even a successful jump often meant capture or death in enemy territory. So why did these men keep going up? Because they had to. The only way the Allies could strike deep into Nazi territory before D-Day was by air. These missions targeted factories, rail lines, and supply depots, crippling the German war machine from within. And they worked, but at a terrible cost. Of every 100 men who flew bombing missions over Europe, 50 were killed. 27 were wounded or captured. Only 25 made it through unscathed. The crews called the B-17 something darker than a fortress. They called it a flying coffin. The B-17 Flying Fortress flew more than 290,000 missions during World War II, dropping over 640,000 tons of bombs. But its legacy isn't just in numbers. It lives in the memories of those who flew it, boys barely out of high school, facing death in the skies day after day. Next time you see one in a museum, remember, behind the rivets and the machine guns were real people, cold, afraid, and astonishingly brave. Their stories remind us of the true cost of war.